Hello, hello. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. How are we all doing? Welcome to the LaunchBox official Twitch channel. Got a fun, casual little stream in store today. I'm your host, AstroBob. It's good to see everyone again after our week of celebrations. Going to give folks some time to come on in, so come on in, get comfy. This one's not going to be too long today, but we've got some incredibly fun things to go over today with some exciting new features of LaunchBox 13.16. How's everyone in the chat doing? Where are we all joining from? I know it's always late in Europe, so appreciate if anyone's joining over that side of the world. But come on in, say hi, let us know where you're joining from. And let us know what you're all playing these days. Always looking for some good recommendations. Here in Texas, just home from work. Fantastic. Yeah, it's a relatively reasonable time zone over there, so glad you're able to join. We'll get started in a couple of minutes, but just to give those here a sort of brief overview of what we're looking at today. We're looking at the brand new features in 13.16. Even if you have already downloaded it and installed it, I guarantee you're going to learn something fun and interesting today. We've got a ton of very interesting use cases to go over regarding some of our new features. Bob Doll says Area of Sorrow finally on Game Boy Advance. Good choice. Fantastic choice there. Recently picked up the Castlevania Dominus collection on Steam, but some good old DS games there that badly needed some re-releasing. So I think we've got some Castlevania in this little collection that we've got here in front of me today. So maybe we can jump into some of that. And speaking of Game Boy Advance, we're going to do something fun with the Game Boy Advance with our new save management features, which makes up a big chunk of 13.16. It's probably going to be take up the majority of this stream. We've got some very interesting use cases to go over with that feature. So like I said, even if you've already had a look at it, we're going to be going very, very deep today on that feature. It's pretty powerful. There's a lot you can do there. So yeah, I guarantee you, you will learn something new. Fantastic. If you haven't had a chance to play around with the new features yet, then this is the perfect stream for you, because we'll give you a brief overview, but we'll also be going deep into what you can do with it and getting the most out of these new features. So we're pretty excited about this. Just before we kick off, I guess we hope everyone had a great time during our celebration week. A couple of weeks ago now. Crikey, time goes quickly. We had a really good time hosting all of the streams and all of the events that happen. All of the events that happened. We hope everyone had a good time. Hopefully, some of you walked away with some prizes. We ended up giving out a lot of cool stuff during the week. We have a forum post here that just kind of summarizes. We had some big hardware reveals, some big hardware stakes up for grabs, which I know went out to some folks all over the world. We had over 200 licenses of each of our different both Windows and Android, and also multiple Steam keys for a lot of the forum events that went on. So yeah, hopefully if anyone did walk away with something, let us know in the chat, and let us know what you've been doing with it. If it's a license, have you been setting it up? If it's a game, enjoying it, or maybe one of our lucky hardware winners is joining us today. So we're going to try and make the most of this channel going forward. The plan for these streams is really to kind of pick a topic and go pretty deep in a certain area. It could be a specific feature set like we're doing today. It could be a specific kind of workflow within LaunchBox, maybe achievements, for example, or sort of media management, things like that. And so we really hope that these will sort of appeal to not just new users who may not have seen these things before, but also folks who maybe we'll learn something along the way. So we'll see how it goes. I know it's a small crowd today. We'll keep it fairly casual. We do have some things to cover. And let me just give you a quick overview of what that is. So for anyone who hasn't seen, we did release LaunchBox 13.16 at the beginning of the week. And we have some very interesting new features here that we're really proud to show off today. The big three being save management, which we'll dive really deep into today. But we also have some additions to Big Box in terms of the Game Discovery Center and for free users. And we also have some miscellaneous kind of fixes, which are often glossed over, but I do want to quickly cover them today just because there are some nice tidbits in there that might be useful. So don't worry about this. We're not going to look at a boring bunch of text. We're actually going to look at it in person, and we'll show you how to get this all up and running. But like I said, this is going to be pretty free flow for those who are just joining. My name is Astrobob, the community manager here at LaunchBox. Feel free to jump into our chat, ask away. We'll do our best to answer questions as we go. And we can take a turn. If there's anything you want to look at in a bit more detail, just let us know. And I think we'll get started. Is everyone ready? Fantastic. Let's just do a quick check. Tell me if the audio sounds good. If anything looks wonky along the way, then please just let me know. Fantastic. Want an Android license is just what you're wanting. Let us know what device you're using it on. If it's a phone, if it's a gaming device. I personally think I'm going to pick up the Retroid Pocket Mini or Retroid Pocket 5. I would like to play around a bit more on Android, and that seems to be the one for me. A nice OLED screen. Mostly just going to be using it for some light-end systems, but yeah, a nice sort of companion piece. My main machine is a Legion Go, so definitely repping the portable lifestyle, although definitely can be a bit awkward when I'm trying to stream off it today, but we'll see how it goes. The Fold. See, I feel like that is the perfect device for gaming on. Just sort of get out that big screen and even in a pinch, potentially use touch controls on the bottom half. But of course, just having that extra real estate. Yeah, and it goes all the way up to PS2, yeah. You can go all the way pretty far on Android now these days, and it's only getting better. Fantastic. All right, well, let's jump in. So, like I said, and I don't want to overhype it, but we've got some really fun use cases that we're going to look at today. So, like I said, 13.16 is out. You can download it right now. And what we're going to cover is save management. Save management is the big new feature in LaunchBox 13.16. You will notice that it is referred to as an early access feature. And just to clarify what this means, with an early access feature, the reason we're labeling it like that is because in its current implementation, it is very likely to change and sort of improve. We wanted to get something out that represents the direction that we're going, but there's so much more we want to do with this feature. And, you know, the end goal being, you know, because the big question we get is, well, can I sync saves across all of my devices? And that is absolutely a goal that we would like to achieve. As of right now, it is more for sort of managing save files locally on your specific build. But over the coming months, we want to improve this a lot. So it's still pretty powerful in its current implementation, but of course, hopefully more to come on that. Now, I just want to take a step back and sort of explain saves because they can be a little bit cumbersome and a little bit tricky. And this is why we implemented this feature in the first place, because we wanted to make it easy to manage those saves. So a little bit of a history lesson on saves, and I promise this will make sense. But we are at the moment referring to saves within RetroArch. So the feature at the moment, it manages saves only within the RetroArch emulator. Now, we would love to open that up to other emulators in the future, and that is absolutely something that we're looking at. But as of right now, it is managing saves within RetroArch. There is a caveat, and we will look at that in that you can technically manage saves from other emulators. It's just a manual process, and we'll cover that as well. But for anyone who's familiar with RetroArch, so on the right here is a LaunchBox directory, and you have an emulators folder, and in RetroArch, you have this saves folder. Now, just to give you some context as to why I'm showing you this, this is where Rewatch saves your games. Now, with this new feature, you shouldn't need to go in here, to be honest, but it's good to know sort of what's happening in case you ever want to, especially if you're migrating from an older build, this can be quite useful to understand. Now, this folder can get a little bit unruly. If you're using an older build of Rewatch, the default functionality is that it will simply dump every save file from any console and any core into this directory. And that can become a little bit unruly. If you are a newer user to LaunchBox and you've downloaded Rewatch recently, what it will do is it will organize things by the core. So you can see here in the saves folder, I have all of my cores from my various emulators. Now, you can configure this to actually be a bit more tidy. You can set it up to organize by platforms. We're going to look at that a little bit later on, but just to kind of give you an overview as to why I'm showing you this, this is where Rewatch stores your information. Regardless of how this is configured, LaunchBox will still be able to pick up your saves, and the save management features will work. So we'll come back to this in a second, but just to give you that little bit of context, so let's jump into LaunchBox. Sonic Black says, can the same LaunchBox license be used on more than one computer? Yes, it can. Yes. So the LaunchBox license is valid for your personal use, and you can install that on a different device if you want. Okay. So the new things with save management is that LaunchBox will show you if you have saves present for a specific game. And it will also allow you to manage those directly from within LaunchBox. So one of the first things I'm going to do is go to Badges, and under Show Badges, under Game Attributes, I'm going to turn on, well, it's turned on everything here. Let's turn off some of these. I don't need everything. But the two that I really care about is has saved game and has saved state. These are new badges that are available in LaunchBox 13.16. And what this will do is if a save file exists in your Rewatch saves directory, the LaunchBox will recognize that save file and it will show you a badge. So along with these badges, what you can do is you can go to Filters, and under Game Saves, you can say has any game saved. Now I'm in my favorites playlist, so let's jump out to all. Do that again. And here we go. I've got a couple of games here that already have saves present on disk. So right off the bat, I can see that, okay, these games have saves. This also works for save states as well. If anyone's unfamiliar with that concept, the save refers to your actual saved data, so the progress you've made through the game, whereas the save state is almost like a snapshot of that game at a specific point in time. And we'll be looking at how you can configure both of those. So rather than actually looking at potential saves, what we're going to do is we're actually going to look at a specific use case. Now, I have next to me here, possibly the greatest console of all time, my good old Game Boy Advance SP. And I also have a copy of The Legend of Zelda Minish Cap, a good old Zelda game. I also have next to me this little bad boy, which is a cartridge dumper. Now, one of the use cases for managing saves is, although the process of actually importing saves off original media obviously isn't managed by LaunchBox, but I want to show you that entire end-to-end process. We are literally going to get my original save off this cartridge from this console. We're going to dump it into onto my PC, and we are going to import it into LaunchBox. And I'm just going to kind of show you how easy that process can be. Okay, so what we'll do, actually, listen to the most nostalgic BIOS screen of all time. If anyone can hear that. The good old Game Boy Advance logo. So what we have, and you won't be able to see this too well, but I got a couple of save files here. I'm not sure you can see that too well. This is an original cartridge with some save files. And what I want to do is I want to actually have LaunchBox manage those for me. So I'm literally, now of course, there are various cartridge dumpers out there, and of course, LaunchBox isn't obviously managing this workflow, but just to give you an example, this is a cartridge dumper where you can literally just pop in a cartridge, and I'm going to plug it into my PC, and I can literally grab the save file off that cartridge. So let's have a look. So this is the contents of that cartridge, and the file that I want is specifically this save file here. This is how it's named. So I'm just going to drop it into my downloads folder. Now, when it comes to saves on original media, every console is different, and so we're not going to cover every single use case here. But in this instance for Game Boy Advance, I know that, for example, I will actually need to convert this save file into a format that is readable by the core that I'm using. So if we look at my core, which is MGBA, these save files are using what's called a .srm file. There are other instances like .sav, and of course, we're not going to dive too deep into that just for the sake of this demo. I know that I need to convert it. I'm going to use this online tool here called Save File Converter, and I'm literally going to go to the save file. I'm going to choose the platform as Game Boy Advance, and it's going to convert it to the SRM file that I need. Okay. And of course, this would work if you have the save file anyway. We're just going all the way from the beginning because I want to show you how sort of smooth and seamless this can be. We have a question here. Said, it would be nice if there's a way to import box art and have it display the same size uniform. We do have, in terms of sizing, obviously you've got the option to sort of adjust the box size within LaunchBox. I'm not sure if you're referring to it actually sort of dynamically resizing boxes to all be the same size, rather than, of course, these boxes are different sort of aspect ratios, so they display differently. But yeah, let us know if there's anything more you'd like to see from that. See if we can get you sorted. So what I have here is this save file in .srm, and I'm going to import this into LaunchBox. Now, a rule of thumb with saves is that RetroArch expects the save to be named exactly the same as the ROM file that you're using. Now, LaunchBox makes this process very, very easy. Obviously, this file is not the same as my ROM, but let's see what happens when I actually try to import it. So the game I'm using here is the Minish Cap. As you can see, there is no saves. I'm going to right-click and go to Edit Metadata. And you'll notice a new section called Game Saves. This is brand new in 13.16. And if you go here, this is where you can manage your save files for this game. Now, right now, there's nothing. I'm going to go to Import Save File. And all I'm going to do is locate the save file that I just created, which is this one. And what it's done is it's imported that save. And you'll notice it's actually renamed it according to the ROM file. So it's done that for me. I don't have to actually rename any of those files. It's made sure that that save file is going to be associated with the ROM that I have. So you can see here it says Game Boy Advance, and then this is the name of the ROM. Now there are two sections here. There is save backups and active saves. And I'll quickly show you what those are. Your active saves are the saves that are in RetroArch's directory, aka the saves that RetroArch is going to use when you launch a game. The saves backup section, this is where LaunchBox will back up your saves. So we have something that we call the save vault, and it's in LaunchBox and saves. So think of it as two directories. One of them is your active saves directory, which is where the majority of your saves will be. But you can technically back up saves if you want, just for an additional copy, or if you want to have multiple instances of the same save. And that is an example we're going to cover here as well. But all I'm going to do is, before I import this, because right now this is just a backup, it's not actually imported. But what I am going to do is I'm going to quickly launch the game, because I want to show you that there is nothing on this cartridge. On this save, sorry. So this is a brand new game, so I've got no files here. Right? So what I'm going to do is hit escape. And let's go back into edit. Let's go to game saves. Now you'll see there is an active save. Now what this means is whenever you launch a game for the first time, depending on the system, it will most likely create a save. Things like older systems like NES, Sega Genesis, that don't actually utilize saves will not actually create a save file. But, you know, a lot of systems, things like Game Boy Advance, SNES, and it does depend on the game, generally will create a save file when you first load them up. So what we have now is the active save that was just created and the save that I imported. Now, what you can do is you can rename this, and I would recommend doing this just to give you an idea. So I'm going to call this my imported cartridge save, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this import button, which is going to make it the active save. So it says restore backup. It says it will overwrite the existing active save, which is fine because there's nothing in there. I just created it. I'm going to hit yes. And there we go. My save file was restored. Let's hit OK. And what we'll do is we'll launch up the Minish Cap once more. Get past the title screen. And there we go. That is the exact same save that was literally just on this little machine right here. Dumped into LaunchBox using the save feature, imported into RetroArch. So now I can literally carry on from where I left off on my cartridge. Escape out of that. So it is literally as simple as going into your saves and just importing a save file. Just remember that once you've imported it, you do actually have to restore it as the active save. Okay? And that's as simple as that. We're going to look at another quick example, but please let us know if you have any questions as we go through. We're going to look at another example, which is for Pokemon Heart Gold. Good example, great game. So we've got a good question here about memory cards. Yes, this is a very good question. We actually have a specific use case that we're going to cover in a second. Certain systems, like the PlayStation 1, utilize memory cards. The Dreamcast is another one. And this very much depends on the emulator and the core themselves. The PlayStation 1, for example, even though it utilizes memory cards, if you're using something like Swan Station, for example, which is the default core for RetroArch, long story short, it will actually create individual save files. And each of those save files is basically its own memory card. So things like PlayStation 1 will still absolutely work out of the box. That's because Swan Station actually manages those save files individually. A better example, which we are going to look at, is Dreamcast, because Dreamcast actually saves everything by default to a single memory card. And I'm going to show you how you can actually change that so that it will work with LaunchBox. So absolutely fantastic question. We are going to come to that a little bit later on because memory cards is a very good question. Obviously, systems like PS2 aren't supported right now because that uses a different emulator. And of course, we are going to have to try and figure out a way to do that. Things like GameCube that utilize memory cards. How can we get it to work nicely with this new functionality? But very good question, and we'll come to that in a second. But in the meantime, we're going to look at Pokemon Heart Gold. This is a fantastic example of games where there is only one save file. And certainly back in the day, if you were like me and you had a sibling with you shared a Game Boy or a DS, and you had one copy of Pokemon, someone was always missing out, or you were having to play off the same cartridge. And so this is a fantastic way if you want to manage multiple versions of saves for games like Pokemon. I'm going to quickly show you the process that we had. But what I do have is I have a save file that exists already. I've already dumped it already under saves and have I put it in the wrong place? Oh no, I have a feeling I may have actually misplaced that one. And it is all the way on my other login. So, whoops. Let me answer some questions in the meantime while I try and get that sorted. There's a question here about, do you always need DAT files when scanning arcade or FB Neo ROMs? Slightly unrelated topic. If you're referring to arcade in terms of how it manages saves, which is what we're talking about here, arcade is a different slightly different platforming that doesn't utilize traditional save files. It actually utilizes high score files. So when you're dealing with arcade ROMs, it generally there isn't generally a sort of traditional save file, but there is a high score file that can be used to utilize things like MAME high scores and also track your own individual high scores. So if you're referring more to the actual setting up of Arcade, unfortunately, we're not going to cover that in too much detail today, but definitely let us know if you have any problems setting that up, and we'll see if we can get you sorted. Okay. Good luck. I think, unfortunately, we're going to have to skip this next example because I did have a save file for Pokemon that was imported, and unfortunately, it's on my other logins. So rather than tweak everything around, we're going to move on from this example. But basically, it's just to show the very straightforward process of going to game saves, import save file, and then once you've restored it, you will have access to that original save. Okay. And Global Underground, thank you very much for the kind words. So we're going to move on to our next example, which is actually backing up saves for an already existing game. So let's say, for example, I've been playing through a game. I haven't got any sort of original save files, but what I want to do is I've been playing a game via an emulator, and I actually want to back it up. So an example here is Banjo-Kazooie for the N64. Fantastic game. Any Banjo fans in the house, give us a shout. Now, this game does have a save file, as you can see indicated by the icon. And also under game saves, I have an active save. Now, the reason I'm bringing up this game as an example is this game is notorious for having content that is missable, or non-replayable once you have beaten it. The famous example is the final boss. Once you beat the final boss of this game, you cannot go back and do it again. It is a shame. But once you've done it, you literally can't go back. You have to either create a brand new save and do it all again, or basically just don't beat the last boss. So, and I'll show you exactly how we are going to run all the way to the last boss in this game. I've got my trusty fast forward that's going to help us out, because it gets a little bit tedious. Back in the days of games that start me at the hub world every single time I want to actually go anywhere in this game. So I'm actually right at the last boss in this game. If I can remember where to go, you have to indulge me as I fast forward my way all the way to the last boss. If anyone knows a quicker way of doing this, let me know. This is just my childhood muscle memory that's telling me where I should be going. But we're going to go, I think it's this one. Actually, I'm pretty sure there's a quicker way of doing this. But I have to go to the woods, don't I? Let's see. Where are we going? You can tell I haven't played this in a while. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. Okay. Whoops. The good old... was it Grant Kirkhope who composed this soundtrack? I think it must be. The sort of ever-changing main theme. And we're just going to brute force our way through here. And yeah, spoilers for a 20-year-old game, I suppose. We are running all the way up to the last boss. Ah, the tunes. They're all coming back. Here we go, the infamous quiz, which I have already actually beaten on this save file. The sort of frustrating quiz, but I have good memories of that. So we are all the way here. So if anyone remembers this, this is right before the last boss. So I basically just need to fill this in. And here we go. So basically, if I was to jump into this pot now, I would take on the last boss, and if I were to beat it, I would not be able to go back. If I were to load up this save file again, what would happen is, well, I wouldn't be able to do it. And maybe I sometimes want to replay this last boss because it is one of the more interesting last bosses. It is pretty good fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save and quit. And of course, we didn't really need to do that, but we just wanted to play some Banjo-Kazooie. Okay. So now back in LaunchBox, we're going to go to Game Saves. We're going to take my active save, and we're going to do the opposite. We're going to use this backup save. So it says your save was successfully backed up. Now, what I would suggest is just marking some of these saves. It will automatically default to just saved game. You'll notice that the active save will always have the name of saved game, even if you were to change it, but your save backups can have any name that they want. So I would suggest marking these so that you know what they are. So I'm just going to call this, let's just say, before final boss. And that's just a nice little save that I could refer to in the future. Now you'll notice that this one is stored in LaunchBox's save directory. If I ever want to restore it, let's say I go back and I beat it, and then, 10 years down the line, and for whatever reason, maybe I want to show someone, hey, remember the last boss in Banjo-Kazooie? I can basically go and restore that save. So if I was to continue playing, I could actually back up multiple copies of that save. You could, of course, use save states, which is probably a better use case. But in this case, for sort of missable things within games, maybe you just want to sort of have that. And when it's personal, when it's your own save, there's something sort of warm and fuzzy. So there we go. Any questions on backing up saves? Pretty much the inverse workflow of taking an active save and actually just restoring it. And then, of course, you can manage those saves by naming them here. If you ever want to tidy up any of these saves, you can always go into the delete icon for each of them. And that will actually delete the save file from the directory. Okay. Well, let's move on. So we have an excellent use case next. Who was it who was asking... Bob Dole is still there, about memory cards. So this is an excellent example, which is memory cards. So how do we actually manage memory cards? So we're going to take Dead or Alive 2, fantastic game, and we're going to open it. And I'm going to show you how this works. So Dreamcast utilizes memory cards called VMUs, or visual memory units. And it's basically going to say, save a new file in slot 1. So the Dreamcast had various slots that you could use VMUs. And so basically, if we go into our options and the memory card, it's saving to A1, which is the memory card slot that Dreamcast uses. So we can just save that data. We're going to save that. Okay. Now we're going to exit. And you'll notice Dreamcast does not work with the save features that we were just looking at. We go into game saves. There's actually nothing there. And the reason for that, now this is core dependent, but by default, LaunchBox utilizes Flycast as the core for Dreamcast. Now, Flycast actually saves its games to a single memory card. And what that means is LaunchBox is not able to actually identify those individual saves, so it's not able to sort of manage them for you. Now, under LaunchBox, I'm going to go to Emulators, Rewatch, and in saves, for example, you might think, well, oh, okay, let's go into the Flycast core. There's nothing in here. And why is that? And that is because the default settings for Flycast is that it saves those games to a single VMU. Now, I know this just from having done this many times, but that VMU is actually located in the BIOS directory under System, DC, and these are the individual save VMUs that the Dreamcast uses. So my Dead or Alive 2 save game has just saved itself to this VMU, which isn't actually very useful. Some people may prefer that. I personally prefer to have individual files for each game. So I'm going to show you how you can actually tweak that. And yes, DOA 2 is a great game. Limited edition Japanese release. Wow. Fantastic. Is that on what platform is that? Or is that, I know there was a few arcade versions in only in Japan. Okay, so, and we actually recently discovered this, so we may try and change this in the future to make it, but for anyone who's setting up Dreamcast or sort of migrating from an older setup, this setting is actually configured in Flycast's core settings inside of Rewatch. So we're going to jump in, and I'm going to show you exactly how to tweak that. So we're going to go into Rewatch's settings. This. Now, under core options and under visual memory unit, and remember, these options, this is very specific to Dreamcast and this specific core, which is Flycast. There may be other systems where the use case would be different, but I'm just showing you this for Dreamcast. Under visual memory unit, you have this option to say per game VMUs. And that's exactly what I want. So what it's going to do is it's going to create a VMU file with only that single game on it, which is much more, it's better for what I want to do here. So I'm going to hit, I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to choose that VMU slot as A1. That's basically what this is saying. And that's all I need to do. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to restart Rewatch. And now it's going to ask me to, I think it's, I might need to actually quit out of that. Let's load that up again. And here we go. So now it's actually saying, do you want to create a new save file? And that's because it's created a brand new VMU unit in my saves directory. I'm going to hit yes. I'm going to create that. I mean, should we do one fight while we're here? Who should we pick? I've always gone. Mine's pretty good. I mean, now I'm just getting distracted. Okay. I mean, before I get too distracted, let's spit out of that. Okay. So now what this has done is, if I go back to my Rewatch saves directory and under Flycast, now I have an individual Dead or Alive 2 save file, and it's saying A1, that's the slot that the Dreamcast uses. But what this means, the whole reason we're doing this, is that now, in LaunchBox, you'll see that it's now correctly picked up that save. It's given me the save badge, and if I go to Game Saves, it's showing me that save file as my active save, which is fantastic. So, of course, this is personal preference. There's a great question in the chat here about imported save games work on Flycast with a VMU Explorer app. So there are various tools out there which will let you essentially explore the contents of this VMU, and you can actually import games. You can sort of inject games into that VMU. You can export them. You can do all sorts of things with them. So it is kind of personal preference. For me personally, just because I prefer to manage saves on an individual basis. The other limitation you have with things like VMUs and memory cards is if you play a lot of games, that VMU is only can store a certain number of, they refer to them as like blocks, or basically it's a limited size. So you may run out of space if you're all sharing the same VMU, whereas if you have a game per VMU, then you're much less likely to do that. And now, of course, it works with my LaunchBox saves. So I can do exactly the same thing. I can go ahead and I can back it up if I want to. I can restore, I can import. Yeah, this is a good use case. There may very well be other systems. I think most of them are covered. You know, like I said, PS1. I mean, let's actually have a quick look at PS1. Because I'm pretty sure, like Swan Station, which is the core that I'm using. Yeah, so I've got a save file here for Croc. Any Croc fans? Fantastic game. And under Swan Station, yeah, so it's actually created individual save files for you. Even though it's technically utilizing a memory card, it's just dependent on the core. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much for the kind words. Glad to hear these useful features, and yeah, hopefully these use cases are very interesting. So we're going to keep going, and we're actually going to look at a very interesting use case. This is something that I guarantee not many people here know. Of course, right now, this functionality works automatically with RetroArch. It automatically picks up the saves, it automatically manages them. But did you know you can technically have LaunchBox manage a save that does not exist in RetroArch? Ooh, exactly. Now, this is a very, very edge case use case. I don't think most people are going to be doing this. I'm going to show you just because we can, and that's what we do here at LaunchBox. We push stuff to the limits just because we can when the actual usability maybe is not so useful. But let's go ahead and do it anyway. So you'll notice that you have the option to import save games, but you also have this option regardless of the system that you're using. So I'm going to take here, let's go back to Banjo-Kazooie. Let's go back to Banjo-Kazooie for the Xbox 360. This is using the Xenia emulator. This is not managed by RetroArch, and therefore it has no context of saves. However, we are going to change that. Now, this is very, very dependent on the game and the emulator you're using. One thing that I will say, this won't work if you have a save file that contains multiple files, for example. But in this use case, I know that this game utilizes a single save file. And so what I want to do is I want to import it into LaunchBox, and I want to have LaunchBox manage that save for me. But in order to do that, I'm going to quickly load up this game because I want it to essentially create the save directory on disk first. So let's, all we have to do is load up a new game. And we just have to make it save a game for me just so that I know where it goes. So now, yeah, empty save, but we are looking at Banjo in widescreen. This was a very nice port back in the day. And we are going to exit. Global Underground, when you say, is this a cross-platform kind of save, can you just confirm what are you talking about between different devices, or obviously the game we're looking at here is, this is the Xbox 360 version versus the N64, so they are technically separate. Okay, yeah, so cross devices. I mentioned this earlier, but right now this is specific to your local machine. There's no reason why you couldn't take sort of saves from your backup directory and import them into another LaunchBox instance that you're using. That process, as of right now, is still manual. But like I said, it's definitely something that we're looking at working towards, because that is the end goal. And the dream is to be able to sort of have all these saves managed and then, of course, have them sync across your different devices. When you say referring to like a single game on different consoles, that one is going to be very much up to the game themselves. So for example, maybe there's someone out there that could do this, but you can't take like an N64 save, for example, and inject that into the same game on a different platform. They're just different formats. In this case, I actually have a different save for the Xbox 360 version of Banjo-Kazooie. So let's look at what that does. I'm going to go to my emulators and under Xenia. Now, don't worry too much about this. I know this is specific to Xenia, but I know that it saves its games in the content directory. This is the ID for the game, and basically this is where it puts that save. So savegame.dat. That is my individual save file for Banjo-Kazooie on the Xbox 360. That's the one that it just created. Now, I have that save. I've actually dumped this from my original console. So under here, Banjo save. It's a little bit of a convoluted process to do this. You actually have to take the file, you have to extract that specific item. But long story short, this is my original 100% save from my original console. Got all the achievements in this game. Very proud of myself. So what I'm going to do is from the one that it just created, I'm just going to delete that because I don't need it. And I'm going to show you how I can actually do this with LaunchBox. So let's take Banjo-Kazooie on the Xbox 360. Let's go to Game Saves. Let's go to Import. And we'll take my original save file, which is under here. It's that save game.dat. Now, all it's done right now is it's imported it into LaunchBox's saves directory. You'll notice that it's tried to rename it. This is actually a weird sort of file name. And don't worry, it will actually remember the original file. So what I want to do is I want to restore the backup. Now, this is a different dialog. You'll notice it says, this emulator does not support automatic restoration of your saves. Would you like to tell us where this save should go? And so I'm going to say yes, why not? And I'm going to go to where it should go, which I know is in Xenia, under content, and it's in this folder right here. I'm going to hit save. And now it's gone and imported that save, and you'll notice it's actually remembered the original and the correct file name. Okay? So now, when I hit OK, this game that is not managed by RetroArch is now showing as having a save. It's got the badge. That means that it will work in all of the filters and playlists that I have set up with that feature. And yeah, it's gone and it's put that save in the correct directory. So now LaunchBox is technically aware of that save. Now, like I said, this is a very specific use case. I imagine for those with hundreds of games, you are probably not going to want to go ahead and import every single save. You may want to. Maybe you have a small system that... and of course, like I said, it is very much dependent on it being an individual save. Some games utilize multiple files for their saves, and in which case it can get a bit messy. So this is really more just like a proof of concept of showing what you could do. In reality, it may not be that useful. It may be, but I just kind of want to show what's possible. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and load up this game now. And what we will see, if I go to the game select menu, get past this. Here we go. Game 1, 100 jiggies, 900 notes, 9 hours, 20 minutes. So this is an original save file that came from an original Xbox 360. I extracted the individual save file that I needed. I then imported that into LaunchBox so that LaunchBox is aware of it. And that means that I can then leverage all of the nice save features, but with a system that is not RetroArch. So exactly, sky's the limit. There's some questions here about... yeah, that's a whole other topic. Flashing saves onto original cartridges. I'm sure it is possible. I personally have not tried it. But yes, there's a whole bunch of tools out there when it comes to managing saves for original cartridges. And let's just have a quick look. Let's see where we are. So this one is actually after the final boss, and I know that because I've got the red honeycombs, which means I've got everything in this game. But hey, we did it. We have a save file for the Xbox 360 managed by LaunchBox. So now we can see that, of course, I could back it up if I want. You'll notice that, and this is very deep, you'll notice that because it's not a managed system, it doesn't actually give you the option to delete that save file. It does, but it also gives you the option to just remove it. And what that means is it's saying, don't track this anymore within LaunchBox. It's not actually going to touch the save file, but it's going to say, hey, don't manage this in LaunchBox. So yeah, very context specific. And of course, hopefully over time, this won't be necessary because we'll hopefully have integrations that can better manage these systems for you. But really, I did warn you that we were going to go deep today, and we did go deep. So, but we're not actually done because we still got another example, which is save states. We haven't even talked about save states. The save states, if anyone, this is more of a personal thing. Some people use them, some people don't. But it is a way to let you snapshot a point in time. And I just want to showcase that it works in exactly the same way. So I'm going to take a good old classic Sonic the Hedgehog. And we're going to use the good old level select code, if anyone remembers that, which is up, down, left, right. Back when cheat codes were nice and simple. We're going to go to my favorite stage here, which is, or any preferences? Anyone's favorite stage? Definitely not Labyrinth Zone. If anyone says Labyrinth Zone, I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to leave the stream. Not a fun stage. Let's go to Starlight Zone, because that one had some banging music. Okay. And I'm actually going to save a state. I'm going to hit Save State. There we go. If anyone doesn't know, this is the pause menu in LaunchBox. It gives you access to save states and load states. Although you can do this within Rewatch, it's just a nice way to quickly access those states. So I've literally saved a state at this level, which means if I want to quickly return to it at any point without using the level select code, of course I could just do that, but why do that when we could use a state? So let's quit out of this. And what we'll see straight away is another icon that is a little bit different. You'll see that it is an orange icon instead of a blue one, but it works in exactly the same way. So if I go to Edit and Game Saves, you'll see now I have an active save state. It works in exactly the same way. You can back them up if you want. You could import a save state. Let's say you downloaded one online, or a nice friend gave you a save state. You can import them, you can restore them. They work in exactly the same way. Now, obviously, save states, if you had multiple save states, because you can have more than one, those would also show up here. Let's quickly show what that looks like. In RetroArch, I'm just going to save my state slot to 1. And then what's another zone we should go to? Someone says, good old Green Hill Stage 1. I mean, yes, that is the classic, but I mean, we could just press start. So, and then, oh, well, looks like I misinputted that. We'll do it from here. We'll do it from Green Hill 1. I'm going to actually save my state. And the reason I did that is because now, there we go. I've got my save states. So they will all show. But of course, there's less value in sort of backing up and sort of managing all of these states, because they're more used for sort of snapshots in time. If there was a save state that you particularly were fond of and you wanted to return to at some point, then of course you could back it up and you could give it a name, for example. But you know, the use case is relatively similar. You've got active save states, you've got save state backups, and LaunchBox will manage those for you. Yep, Green Hill definitely has the most nostalgia. Who said Labyrinth Zone? Fairan said Labyrinth Zone. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the stream, Fairan. I'm sorry. Yep, states are great for arcade bosses. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely more of a personal preference. I personally don't use them too much. And also, if you use things like retro achievements, if you play in hardcore mode, they actually force those features off, so you're not actually allowed to use those. Which is why I personally love playing arcade games, because putting in as many coins as you want technically doesn't count as avoiding hardcore mode, which is always fun. I'm just kidding, Farron. You're come back to the stream. Okay, so let's just quickly recap. We covered a bunch of use cases here. So we actually took an original save using a dumper from this lovely little console here. We imported that in the form of the Misc cap. We had to skip over Heart Gold because I didn't prepare that properly, but we can essentially import a save on disk. We can back up saves like we did with Banjo-Kazooie, so we can take a point in time and we can back it up and refer to that save at a different point in time. We talked about using memory cards and specifically the Dreamcast and how you can sort of tweak that to work with the save management. We looked at manually referring to and importing saves in the form of Banjo-Kazooie for the Xbox 360. And of course, we looked at save states. So the final thing we want to do is, now that we've got this lovely save data in here, we can actually create some playlists with those, with that information. So I can create a playlist. The field that you want to use is something called game saves. Now, there are a couple of options here. It looks confusing, but basically it boils down to three things. When it refers to any save, that is referring to either the save game or the save state. So it's both. Whereas if you were to just say has any saved game, that is specifically the save file. And likewise, the save state is specifically the state. So where this is useful is you could let's create a playlist that literally just says has any save. We'll hit OK. And I forgot to make that appear in my platform categories. Let's change that. I want that to appear in the root. There we go. It has any save. Now, of course, that's exactly the same as just going to the filter and going to has any save using one of these options. But of course, this is combining both of them together. Perhaps a better playlist that I could use is, let's go back down to game saves. What I'm particularly interested in is I want to know games where I have backed up a save. So for example, if I've imported a bunch of childhood saves, or let's say I've got those childhood saves as backups, I want to know which of my games actually have backups. So I'm going to create a playlist that says, has any saved game backup is the one that I want. So we'll call this saved backups. Make it appear in the root. And here we go. So these are only games where I have a very specific backup of that save. So for the Misc, for example, it was my imported cartridge save. For Banjo-Kazooie, it was the before final boss save that we manually created. And of course, for the Xbox 360 version, that was the one that we imported. In theory, with this use case, now that I've actually imported it, I don't really need that backup, so I could technically delete it. Don't really need it there anymore. And of course, Dead or Alive 2, we also don't need that one, so I'm going to delete it. But yeah, so these two games, I have specific backups of those, and then that playlist allows me to view that. Okay. I can't believe we've gone nearly a full hour on just on game saves alone, but I did warn you we were going to go deep. I hope you found some of that interesting. We are going to cover a few other quick tidbits of the release because it's not all just about saves, but I'm going to give a breather just for any questions. If anyone has anything else they'd like to know about saves, then let us know. And Fishbot, that's very kind of you. Thank you. I'm glad you appreciate these these guides. Okay. Well, if anyone has any more questions, I guess just I did touch on it briefly. So just to close out with saves, of course, early access, still a lot you can do with it right now, but definitely a lot that we do want to do with it. We know the most common request right now is, when can I sync my saves across devices? And of course, that would be a fantastic goal to reach. Having LaunchBox just manage all of these for you, and then of course do that across different instances. That would be lovely. But yeah, let us know how you get on with it. If you have any questions or feedback, it's always evolving. So we're going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to go over to Big Box. So for those who don't know, Big Box is the premium feature that allows you to view games in a sort of console style, keyboard and mouse sort of controller friendly interface. And previously this has been locked to the premium license of LaunchBox. And with 13.16, Big Box users can now experience that for the first time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quit out of my instance. I'm just going to dump my license out of LaunchBox, and I'm going to open it back up. And I'm running this build off my SD card, so there we go. So now I'm on a free version. It says at the top here, it's the free version. And if I go to open Big Box, it's going to say, hey, it's only available for premium, but that's okay. You can start a trial. And what this means is every time you launch up Big Box, you have 30 minutes access to most of the features. The main restrictions is that you cannot launch games and you cannot change themes. But the big, obviously, use case of Big Box is that you can sort of see how it runs on your system. You can see sort of if it's an interface that you really enjoy. You can tweak. You can sort of tweak it to your liking. So it basically says your 30-minute trial. So yeah, let's put that. This is the Game Discovery Center, which is what it defaults to in my instance when I launch Big Box. I can see the recently played games that I've just played up here, and it gives me some nice cover art. This is using the fan art image category. And go through and see things I've recently added. Added some Sega Saturn, some Sonic R. I mean, that's tempting. We could just play Sonic R for the next 30 minutes. 3D Pinball was a fan favorite from the Celebration streams. Could spend a lot of time playing that. But yeah, you basically have full access to Big Box. You will notice that if you try and play a game, so let's try and play, I don't know, Sonic Spinball. It is going to say, hey, unfortunately, this requires premium, and that's okay. You'll also notice that if you try to change themes, it also says, hey, you need premium. So let's actually go and pretend that I do have premium. Maybe you picked it up in our sale a few weeks ago, or if you didn't, maybe this will be the perfect opportunity for you to check out Big Box and see if it works for you. But let's just pop my license back in there. And now I'm going to open up Big Box once more. Okay, so I guess not too much. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory in terms of what it is, but you essentially have a 30-minute free trial, and that is every time you launch up Big Box. It's not just a 30 minutes and then it's done and done. Whenever you launch it, you can sort of have time to sort of play around with it and see if it works for you. One of the other things we added to Big Box is our community playlists. If anyone... let me just turn off this audio for a second. If anyone participated in our community playlist events throughout our celebration week, we had some great events where we were hosting ideas from the community so they could contribute to playlists that would show up in the Game Discovery Center. And that was a fantastic event. We had amazing submissions there. We had some Steam keys that went out, and those playlists are actually now in the Game Discovery Center. So let's actually scroll down and let's see if we can find some. So I've got, so you'll notice that every row in the Game Discovery Center is kind of highlighting a different aspect of your library. My library is not too big right now. It's about under 300 games. So it's basically saying things like, hey, because you liked previous games, it's exploring different genres that are in your library. This is best games developed by Sonic Team. I mean, it knows me very well, actually, because one of my favorite developers, and I have a lot of games by them in my library. But here we go. This is an example of some manual playlists in Big Box. For example, what the LaunchBox team is playing now. This is only showing a few items because I don't have a huge library. The more that you have, the more that will obviously show up here. But let's keep going because I know that... let's see if we can find it. Because we played some Dreamcast. Here we go. Community top picks. So these were the event playlists that were curated throughout our celebration. These were sort of sourced games that were sourced by the community. The top picks is kind of our community's sort of top 5 games of all time. So the idea for this playlist is it's sourced directly from the LaunchBox community, and it hopefully should give you some ideas for some highly recommended and highly rated games. I think our community has great taste here. I'm seeing a lot of good choices here. Sonic Adventure 2, SSX 3. But of course, this is restricted to games that are in your library. And likewise, right underneath this, we have our party time playlist. This was created for games that are good to whip out at a party or play with friends. Some great ones here, things like Bombman 64. Yes, the multiplayer mode in Sonic Adventure 2. You'll notice that obviously with my library, because it's not too big, and there are a lot of games submitted for both of these. So if your library is a lot larger, then these may show vastly different results to you. But hopefully this is a really nice addition to not just things like, best of certain time periods, best of specific platforms, years, things like that. We do have plans to roll out sort of monthly playlists depending on the themes. For example, we're working on a Halloween one right now, so you can see some sort of spooky games to get stuck into for the month of October. And I imagine other sort of seasonal events and further playlists will be coming in the future. Okay, so not too much on the big box side. Some very small but very important features there. Obviously, the trial mode that you can leverage if you're a free user. And also just some really nice new ways that you can browse your library. I personally am really loving the Game Discovery Center. I use it as my home screen for big box. Of course, you do have the other views in big box if you prefer to view things by sort of traditional sort of platform categories. And of course, I'm using the default theme here, but of course, you can get really crazy with the types of themes within big box. All right. If anyone has any questions on that, we have a couple more things to show. For anyone who's still with us, you are the hardcore of the hardcore. Thank you for sticking with us. And we're going to cover a few other little tips and tweaks. Fantastic. So although those are the biggest features for 13.16, there are some other... there's more. It's not just those three. If you go to our release notes or our release article, you can actually see under other sort of improvements and fixes. I personally love reading these things because they're sort of small tweaks that may not affect many people, but if you find one that does, I think they can be really nice. So we'll cover a few of them. The first one being the addition of Big P Emu as a plugin for LaunchBox. So Big P Emu is an emulator that is used in a specific use case for Atari Jaguar and Atari Jaguar CD. If you go to Manage and under Plugins, you'll see that Big P Emu is an available plugin. Remember, the plugin is not the same as the emulator. The plugin just manages the installation of that emulator, so you don't technically have to use it. The reason I have this installed is because if I go to Atari Jaguar, a good old game, Dragon's Lair, a little bit compressed on the Atari Jaguar CD, but if I try and play it, it will actually say, hey, we recommend Big P Emu as the best way to play Atari Jaguar games on your device. It does not appear to be installed, but we can automatically download and configure it for you. And so remember, emulators that have sort of plugins in LaunchBox will be able to be automatically downloaded and configured in this method. The same applies for RetroArch. The same applies for things like Dolphin, things like GameCube. If you try that, it will say, hey, we recommend Dolphin. Do you want us to download and configure it for you? But let's do Atari Jaguar. Whoops, sorry, that was one that I'd already configured. Here we go, Dragon's Lair. We're going to say, hey, yes, install Big P Emu. It's going to go ahead. It's going to do that in the background for me. And now it's as simple as literally opening that game. Double click. And here we go. Dragon's Lair. A game that I have big respect for, but have never managed to get past the opening, literally the opening cutscene. I honestly have no idea how to properly play this game. And Let me figure out what the controls are here. All right, let's see if I can do it. I think it's based on like key presses, like directional presses. You have to move out of the way, I think. So I know I'm going to fall down this bridge. I think I have to press... Yeah, see, I don't know. I know the newer version tells you sort of what you should press, and yeah, I never could figure out how to properly play this game. But it looks beautiful, albeit a little bit compressed. But this is running on the Big P Emu emulator, which of course, very easy to get that up and running. And I just died again. So there we go. So this is Big P Emu's overlay. Let's just exit out of that. Sword when... yes. Then up, then left. Yeah, I need to... I'm trying to figure out what the controls are bound to, so I'm just making excuses here. But yeah, I've seen playthroughs of it, and I know the newer HD re-releases, it's a very gorgeous looking game. Okay, so that's Big P Emu as a plugin, and as we said in the past, we're looking to add more emulators to LaunchBox in the form of plugins that makes it very easy to automatically download and configure those. Speaking of configuring emulators, a small feature that was introduced is the ability to lock emulator versions. Now, although of course we want to try and make it as easy as possible to download and update emulators, we understand that some people have specific use cases where they may not actually want to do that. So under Manage Emulators, you'll see now that, and this was introduced in 13.15, where it will tell you the version and it will show you if it's up to date or not. So PCSX2, for example, has an update. Whereas with RetroArch, you'll notice that I have the option to update it. Of course, I'm on the latest version here, but PCSX2, I can actually update it directly within RetroArch. Now, we heard some feedback from folks that not everyone wants to do this. And of course, we understand that that is a valid use case. So what we added was the ability to lock an emulator version so that it will not actually check for updates. And all you have to do is just right-click on the emulator, and it says don't check for updates. So, for example, PCSX2 releases a lot of different versions. They have updates that go out almost daily. And so in this case, I'm going to say, well, actually, I don't need all of those versions right now. I'm quite happy with it as it is. So what I'm going to do is right-click and do don't check for updates. And now, under status, it puts the little red lock icon to indicate that that emulator version is now locked. It's not going to check for those updates. And you'll notice that you don't actually have the option to update it here anymore. So small thing, but, and of course, a sort of specific use case there, but we know that some folks prefer to manage their own emulators for them, and this can just help you easily identify which of those emulators are locked. There are specific emulators that are very, very specific. For example, if anyone has heard of Dolphin Triforce Fork, that is a specific emulator that is used to play some of the Triforce arcade games like F-Zero AX and the Mario Kart arcade games. That is a specific version that will actually automatically show up as locked in LaunchBox because it is a very specific instance of that emulator. So there's some deep cuts, nuggets of wisdom for you there. But thanks for the kind comment there. It says LaunchBox Game Save Manager is by far the most helpful parameter among others. Well, we really appreciate that. We are genuinely very happy that the feedback so far has been very positive for the Save Manager. Some other quick tweaks in 13.16 is custom fields. I was pleasantly surprised. I saw a message in Discord today that someone wasn't actually aware that custom fields existed, even though this has been around for a long time. Custom fields is a very cool way to be able to add additional information to your games. And the reason you would want to do this is so that you can then utilize things like playlists and filters for a workflow that works for you. It is accessible by going to custom fields. Now, the big change here is that previously, custom fields would just allow you to input a text string, whereas now, these fields will show as a drop-down list. Now, this was very small, but very big one for me personally. I'm going to give you an example of how this might work. So I'm going to create a tags custom field, and I want to use this just to tag sort of random bits of metadata that don't really fall within any of the default fields within LaunchBox. So the example here is under GameCube, for example, I have some texture packs installed for these games. And I just want to remember which games I have texture packs installed for, so that if I ever need to clean up some space, I can come and do that. So let's say, for example, I know I've got Paper Mario, Luigi's Mansion, and Kirby's Air Ride. I'm going to edit, and I'm going to... I actually have to create the field first. So let's do it for one. Let's just go to Kirby's Air Ride. I'm going to create a new field called tags. And I'm just going to put in a value of texture. And now you can see I've got a drop-down value. I actually need to commit that first. Let's edit these other ones. So now it says custom field tags, and I can actually choose that value of texture, which is great. Another example is for maybe some PC games. I might have some mods installed, so I just want to tag those games with mods so that I can easily identify that. So let's take Relink, Kingdom Hearts 3. Oops, again, I need to... Oh no, I can add the value here. So custom field tags. I could choose an existing value, or I can add a new one. So I'm just going to call this one mods. And there we go. So now, under custom fields, I have a drop-down with multiple values that I can easily select. Previously, those were text fields that you would have to actually just input, whereas now this gives you a very nice and easy way to select from a drop-down. Likewise, I've created a custom field here for purchase, just to track my purchase history, things like digital or physical games, things like that. I think we're getting to the end. Some very small fixes that some people might appreciate. The advanced search option. Previously, this would actually remain on screen, which could cause issues when you were trying to navigate through your platforms. You'll notice now that this will actually gracefully move itself out of the way when you try to look at your platforms. And obviously, it shows itself again when you go back to the search field. So if you're looking at any of these values, of course it's there, but if you sort of move your mouse off it, it nicely, gracefully moves itself out of the way, which was a nice quality of life fix. There's a question here that says, is there a new way to delete those custom fields? There isn't anything new per se for that, but in terms of how you can delete them, it's essentially, you just have to remove the values from all of the instances, and then that field will essentially just delete itself. We can actually do that. So for example, let's look at these purchased digital games. All I would do is go and delete that value. And now if I look at my custom fields, I can't remember if it actually, yeah, so it goes ahead and it just deletes that, because if there is no item in the database with that value, then that field is just automatically removed. Nice, yep, custom fields can be very useful. There's a lot of different workflows you can do with custom fields. Personally, tags is one that I've implemented myself just because it's random bits of metadata that don't necessarily warrant their own field. Of course, you can do that. I think my rule of thumb is if you're tracking multiple values for something, so for example, purchased can have multiple values. It could be physical, digital, it could be things like, borrowed, it could be, key, things like that. So it has multiple values, so that warrants a custom field in my eyes, whereas individual things that just have like one value, I tend to assign it to tags so that I don't just create a bunch of custom fields. There's nothing technically wrong with it, but of course, just for keeping things tidy. Yep. Okay. Very, very quick things. This was correctly pointed out on Discord, is the audit window. Previously wasn't registering keyboard shortcuts. This has now been fixed. So now when you're managing games within the audit window, these nice keyboard shortcuts will work. So the same way that you can access them in the rest of LaunchBox can be done here. And we had some fixes related to Amazon games. If anyone's been importing games from that storefront, there was a bit of a hiccup with their API about a week back. This has been addressed, so those imports should now no longer be failing. But yes, who would have thought we would go this deep into 13.16? But I think that pretty much covers everything. So we really appreciate those who are still here. We're going to start wrapping up soon, but we'll hang around here for some questions. So thank you for that. Yes, it's been a fun showcase, and I think we'd love to do these in a bit more detail. Obviously, not every feature warrants this kind of deep dive, but certainly with the saves, I feel like there are some really good use cases to cover. And no problem. I appreciate you all hanging around. I did see we had a question here about bezels, although not particularly how to import a bunch of game bezels and shaders to a specific platform. So that in itself, unfortunately, is a whole other topic and probably would warrant its own kind of stream with, you know, how do I make my games look pretty? How do I get bezels? How do I install shaders? Things like that. Unfortunately, we're just not going to have time to cover that today. There are some very good tutorials, and I think we might even have one on our own channel for bezels and shaders. But yes, definitely, I think we could do something, a whole stream on that in the future. So I'm sorry we can't dive too deep into the details there. But yes, that is a whole other topic. What's everyone got lined up? I know we were talking about what were we playing at the beginning of the stream? I can't remember now. Someone said what they were playing. But if anyone has any suggestions, you can always hop into the Discovery Center, the Big Box Game Discovery Center, and find some new suggestions. I personally am making my way through Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, which is highly recommended. Although, maybe I should actually, maybe I can pick up Misc back up on my Game Boy Advance. That might be something fun. Amazing. Being able to watch these streams has helped with my LaunchBox setup. So thank you, and glad you found them helpful. Like I said, we want to do more of these with different topics. So if anyone has any suggestions for sort of deep dive areas that you'd like to jump into, like I just said, shaders and bezels and sort of how to make your games look pretty, that could be, it's a whole stream just on that. There's the potential to do things on topics like achievements, or also things like using Android, for example. I know a lot of our streams are based obviously on the Windows version, but of course we don't want to leave out our Android users, so there is potential to do some deep dives in on that platform as well. Awesome. Yeah, Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Yes. Yes, I've been hearing good things about that one. That is one of the games that we gave away, actually, in one of our prizes. And I think I noticed some Steam winners in the stream as well. So thanks for... I know we had some issues with getting those keys out to you, but that is all now sorted. So hopefully you've been enjoying those games. Yes, theme development. Yes, that certainly is a whole other thing, and goes a lot deeper than I will pretend to know how to manage. But hey, that's why we have other much more technical folks than me doing these. So yes, theming and customization, I think, is a good topic. Amazing. What is my favorite big box theme? That is a very good question. maybe a hot take, but I'm honestly squarely in team default. And that's not to discredit any of the amazing themes that are out there. It is purely just my own personal preference of, because I do a lot of sort of testing and configuration. I use the default theme mostly to sort of validate some of the new features that we're working on and really just kind of use the bare minimum. I also, like I said, I mainly play on a Legion Go. So it sort of works well on that screen. I'm sort of working with limited space, so I don't have a huge luxury of having, say, like videos for every single game. So yeah, I personally stick very much with the default. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of themes. Maybe one day when I get my own big PC, I would love to get videos for everything and install some of the amazing community themes as well. Hey, I didn't say default was boring. The good old default. But yes, it has its there's a charm in its simplicity. Exactly, minimal themes. I use the yes, the default LaunchBox, the default big box, but they work for me, and it's good to have that choice. Yeah, see, now I've got the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 character select music in my head since we were just talking about that game. It's unfortunately not one that I think I have in this. Oh, look at that. Do have it. I do have it in this collection. I mean, here's what we're going to do. We're just going to let the game play out on the character select screen. There we go. I mean, we can just let the stream run for another hour with this in the background. Good questions. Do you think we will ever see FPGA price card on PC platforms? Yeah. I mean, the hardware, getting into the hardware game is a whole other beast for us. We're very much focused on the creating the platform side of things, and of course potentially supporting additional hardware. I've definitely seen that request a few times before, but yeah, certainly not in the short term. I mean, who should we pick? I mean, this character select is looking very bare compared to the full roster. I booted up the Arcade Classics collection, and I think everyone is unlocked right out of the gate. Yeah, this is looking. Go with Spider-Man. Yeah, I mean, before I get my butt kicked on stream, I think we'll just leave it at that. But yeah, well, thank you all for coming, guys. We really appreciate this. Thank you for all the kind words, and I hope this has been interesting. It will be available to rewatch if you missed any bits or want to refer to this later. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. Just jump out of that. Alrighty. Well, we'll close this down. Thank you everyone for coming, and happy gaming. Reach out to us in Discord if anyone has any questions, or on the forums, and we'll speak to you all again soon. Alrighty, bye for now. Take care.